So back in 2020, I, Steven Shinder, started a podcast called Delayed Replay, recapping and reviewing the latest films. However, it got broadcast into an alternate universe, where those films got delayed and came out differently from how I was describing them. Because of how me and my guests had been describing the films, people in that other universe were saying that this was all an improvised comedy podcast, which, listening back, I can totally get why they believe that. A lot of weird stuff happened in that first year, and I even met my other self from that other universe, who pops in from time to time, for better or worse. And now, in the year 2023, this podcast continues, still recapping and reviewing movies and sometimes some other things that got delayed or cancelled in that other universe. A new episode Saturdays every other week, unless I decide otherwise for some special reason or whatever. You are listening to Delayed Replay, Season 4.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we usually recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. But this is an instance where we're talking about a movie that never came out in that other universe but came out here back in 2015. It's the We're the Millers sequel titled We're Still the Millers. But introductions are in order. Joining me once again, you may have heard him on some previous episodes or on Decorative Vegetables podcasts a while back. It is Kiyan. How's it going, dude?
Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me back on, Steven. This is the first podcast I've recorded in months since I guess we won't dwell on this for too long, but I don't consistently podcast anymore now that Decorative Vegetable is basically, I'm not really a part of it anymore.
Yeah, when you got banned for misconduct.
Right, yeah. But yeah, thanks for having me back on, Steven. And Dylan, if you're listening, take that. I didn't appear on any of your stuff first. I appeared here first after my demise several months ago.
Yeah, well, when you say it like that, it sounds like that was your only reason for coming on here.
And you'd be right in thinking that, Steven. No,
okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. And also, another thing, I said I wouldn't dwell on this too long, so I'll just wrap this up by saying, for all those years of podcasting that I did, Dylan and I always joked that we would one day record in a car. And indeed, I am currently recording in my car. For the first time.
Oh, so you haven't done this like before with a podcast, at least? In the car?
No.
Okay. Well, you know what they say.
That it's hot as hell in a parked car on a sunny summer night.
Oh, I don't know. I was just gonna be silent for a moment and then moved on to like the thing and just not say what they say, but...
Yeah, I guess I just ruined that.
Yeah, good job. But anyway, so I guess we should talk about our previous experiences with the first movie. So mine is pretty straightforward. Around the time it came out, my cousins were like, Steven, you should watch We're the Millers, it's so funny. And I said, it looks kind of stupid. And so I didn't watch it until like several months ago. I don't remember if it was this year or last year. I'll put the link to my Letterboxd review in the show notes so people will see. But overall, I thought the first movie was fine, like a 7 out of 10. It had some funny moments, but also felt kind of like a slog in places for me. But what about you? What do you remember of your experience with the first movie?
Yeah, well, as you already know from our discussion beforehand, not much. I believe I watched it a couple years after it came out. I think maybe it was like 2015 or 16 that I watched it, because it came out in 2013.
Right.
And I remember, until I refreshed my memory prior to this, recently, I remembered almost nothing about it, except the one meme that came out of it, the "you guys are getting paid" thing, and just kind of browsing through screenshots and reading the summary that I did beforehand to refresh my memory here about the first one, I realized that I remembered almost nothing about the plot itself or the characters or anything like that. It kind of gradually came back to me, but yeah, it wasn't. It is indeed a pretty forgettable, just like middle of the road movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is funny because they do drive in the middle of a road, you might say,
Right,
throughout the movie. But yeah, back in May when I saw you and Dylan in person, you mentioned the movie, and it sounded like you'd seen it recently. So I was like, okay, I'll invite Kiyan to talk about the sequel for the first movie's 10th anniversary. And lo and behold, like everything you just told me. So yeah.
Yeah, everything you knew was a lie.
Yeah, so the second movie, We're Still the Millers, came out in August 2015. It went up against Fantastic and, of course, made more money than Fantastic. Yeah, that Fantastic Four reboot movie. Yeah, I bet you're happy about that because you don't really care for superhero movies, right?
Yeah, the faster the superhero bubble pops, the I don't know, happier I'll be or something. Not that I really care, not that I'm really super invested, but
Super invested. I see what you did there.
what was that? Sorry.
Super invested. I see what you did there.
I don't even know what I did there, so it was a total accident.
Yeah, I figured.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah. Coming in clutch with a realization.
Oh, gee.
Gosh, that has like entered my lexicon. I found myself typing a post saying Star Trek Strange New Worlds coming in clutch with one of the best Spock stories in all of Trek.
And the stupid / funny thing about it is I only really said it for that one day.
Yeah. But anyway, so for those who haven't seen the first movie and for whatever reason are listening to this, Jason Sudeikis, involved with the drug world, got involved with the guy played by Ed Helms, who's like a drug dealer, and he tries doing the job, smuggling drugs for him across the border. And of course, to do this, he recruits a few people he knows to pretend to be a family called the Millers. And so you got Jennifer Aniston as Rose, Jason Sudeikis, his name is David. You have Kenny, played by Will Poulter, I think that's how it's pronounced. If not, I'm sorry. And Casey, played by Emma Roberts. And of course, as is predictable, they sort of become a family over the course of it, and even help out DEA agent, played by Nick Offerman, to take down the drug lord. And so now they're in witness protection in some neighborhood until that guy's trial or whatever. And there's some marijuana plants in their garden, and they're posing as the Miller family still. So that's pretty much where we begin with this second movie. What were your thoughts on how it picked up from the end of the first one?
Yeah, well, you know, the title really gives it away. We're still the Millers, right? So they're still kind of in this false mode of existence. You might,
Yeah, it spoils everything.
right? And I would, I almost wish that they took this one in a completely different direction, so that they could have titled it "Were the Millers," you know?
Oh, like they used to be the Millers.
Count the apostrophe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe in some other universe that happened. I don't know. Like how in some other universe there's a bunch of Speed Racer sequels. I'm glad I don't live in that one.
But yes, the title gives it away. This picks up where the last one left off, as you mentioned. They're still the Millers. I couldn't tell if this was a retcon. Thanks to my terrible memory of the first one, but they're somehow now positioned directly on the San Andreas Fault. Right, you find out that's where that house is. It's sort of just built right on the fault line.
Yeah, I mean, the set of this new neighborhood looks very different from how it looked at the end of the first movie. So I do think there is retconning going on. It's like how when they made the fifth Pirates of the Caribbean movie, it felt like they didn't care at all about continuity. So yeah.
Perhaps for the better, you know. It allowed them to tell the story that they, I guess, wanted to tell here.
Oh yeah, for We're Still the Millers, yeah. Um, so yeah, what's interesting about the San Andreas Fault is that, they make a big deal of it. Like, you have Kenny frequently mentioning Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, classic video game back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And this annoys the hell out of the other characters. And they even had Dwayne The Rock Johnson in this movie, I guess as a reference to that movie he was in, San Andreas, which is terrible.
Right? Yeah, I remember that movie actually. Better than better than We're the Millers.
Yeah, the Rock basically plays the antagonist in this one. They gotta have like the big muscly person to be the antagonist for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. And it's at this point in the movie that they just go full Wayne's World, but less self-aware, and just insert tons of Grand Theft Auto product placement. I mean, they have all the games, all the spin-offs lining the shelves. It's a little in your face.
Yeah, and they even advertise like these crackers. Like they bring home some groceries, and one of them brings out these. It's like an off-brand version of Ritz. It's called Blitz crackers, and and they're like, oh, these are bland and generic. Just get the real shit. And you think that they're gonna stick with the Blitz, but no, they later get the Ritz crackers. That's kind of one of the full circle arcs that happens in this movie, weirdly enough.
Right. They go from the generic brand to getting a little bit ritzier, you might say. Guess the witness protection program is doing them well.
Right. And of course, because of the plants, the MJ, David notices these and he's trying to like sort of sell them again, sort of a backslide for his arc in a way. So the other characters are like, what the hell are you doing? We just got out of that whole drug world. And, you need to insert conflict somehow, but I'm not sure if this was the way to do it. It was kind of annoying.
Yeah, but then again, the previous movie did that's sort of how it ended, as you described earlier on. So it wasn't too out of left field, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I guess because the first one ended with them getting along, it's like, on one hand, you kind of want them to still get along, but then if they do, then what's the point of doing another movie if they're just all getting along?
Right.
Yeah, and there are like some issues that they run into, like living with each other. Like David and Rose, Jason Sudeikis and Jennifer Aniston's characters, they're in a relationship now, and they make a lot of noise at night, and it annoys Kenny and Casey. And Kenny even says, "You guys are getting laid?"
Oh my god, yeah, that was great. I mean, there. Well, so here's the thing: is that they really couldn't have followed up that. It's not even a scene; it's just a particular moment. It's just a line, really, and that was really the only thing that survived, the only cultural artifact you might say to have come out of the first one.
What's funny about that meme is seeing it before seeing the movie, it sounded funnier in my head than it actually sounded when I actually watched the scene.
Yeah, it's more subdued than the meme really plays it out to be, in a way.
Yeah, the facial expression is pretty funny too, but yeah.
I was gonna say there's really no way they could have followed it up, but so they just replicated it, whatever.
Yeah, to the point where David or actually I think it was Casey who decides this, because if they're making a mess in the house, and Casey's like, oh, let's just hire someone. And so she hires a maid played by Courtney Cox, another cast member from Friends. And of course, Kenny says, "You guys are getting a maid?"
So
Yeah, and this is where you realize that they're just going to keep on doing it. Probably the most annoying thing about this movie.
Yeah, and having the maid around also causes another problem because, David is doing the stuff, growing the weeds and whatnot, and they have to keep on hiding it from the maid and making sure she doesn't, like, stitch on them and stuff. So, yeah, what'd you think of how all that dynamic that they threw into this movie?
Yeah, to be honest, at this point, sort of at this early stage, I realized that things were just going to be a lot more contrived than the first one. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like the setup to the first movie was anything particularly spectacular, but it at least established, sort of goal. Well, it established sort of a comedic setup and then a goal that they have to accomplish, which is essentially the thrust of the first movie. This one had less of that, I would say. It felt more disjointed. It felt more, I don't know, just disconnected or even random, I want to say. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I agree. It felt like because the first movie is definitely, you like, get from here to here and then get back to here.
Right, it's
And
like Mad Max Fury Road, but without all the death. And...
yeah, it's funny that you say that because the previous episode of this podcast was on the Furiosa prequel spin-off movie.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I'm sorry. I haven't kept up with this podcast in quite a while, so I didn't even know that, but I guess that's just how good I am.
As someone who records in a car, you should be listening to podcasts about cars like Furiosa,
Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, movies about cars. Okay, sorry. I think you just misspoke. Okay, never mind. I'm just, it's hot in here. It's hot in this car.
No, yeah, the weather is terrible in California. Like, I'm sure it's worse in other places. Well, of course it's worse in other places, but that's still no excuse for the weather to be what it is.
Right.
So the maid turns out to have, like, she has, like, this sly, sneaky side where basically it turns out that she's trying to con them. She's trying to steal stuff from them and just lying to their faces. And so when they find this out later, Kenny is like, "Wait, you guys are getting played?"
Yeah. We'll have to do like a roundup at the end and decide which one was our favorite.
Yeah.
They were all pretty groan-inducing, to be honest.
I've even seen clips of, like, from back in the day, people would, like, sneak in a cell phone during certain moments and you'd hear the groans and it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, if anything, that became a meme. That was the only thing that really came out of this sequel, was the stupid groan reaction videos.
Yeah, or there's the edits where people will insert like live studio audience laughter, but it feels so forced and contrived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like the plot at this point.
Yeah.
Speaking of groans, what did you think about again, I hesitate to use this word, but almost completely random twist that the maid was sort of, I forget which style and which type of martial art this was, but she was a pretty advanced practitioner. And once they found out about, her deception, things just flew off the handle, right? She was, coming at them. They stood absolutely no chance, obviously, and they were grunting and groaning for what felt to be an overindulgent amount of time.
No, yeah, I think they say it really quickly that it's hard to, like, grasp it right away unless you have the subtitles on, but she says she practices ninjutsu. Yeah, and so she's doing, like, all these flips and citing quotes from Ninja Turtles and Three Ninjas, those movies. Yeah, again, like, very groan-inducing stuff, but it is pretty funny seeing Kenny get beat up after, like, all the groan-inducing lines.
I actually felt kind of bad for him and all of them, but wow, I guess I see where your sympathies lie, Steven.
No.
Not with not with any of these characters.
No, yeah, it's okay as long as they're fictional,
Yeah, that's why we hold the weather culpable, because it's all too real.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of weather, when she's done like beating all these people up, this other neighbor, played by Carl Weathers, comes in and tries boxing with her, and so this is when like a really long match ensues between the two. And again, just driving home that some of the moments in this movie feel very random and contrived.
Right, and what did you think about the entire... I almost want to call it like an arc inserted into the middle of the movie that just completely departs from any of our four main characters, just to focus on these two seemingly side characters for most of the movie.
Oh, yeah, like they basically keep on fighting each other and get in a taxi that's driven by Kevin James, and it starts to feel like the chicken fight in Family Guy,
Right, I was just going to say that, actually. But yeah, maybe that's why we've both seemingly had driving on the brain, not just the fact that I'm currently sitting in a car, but also the fact that a considerable amount of this movie takes place on the inside of a car. Seemingly as a budget-saving maneuver.
Yeah, like you can tell because the camera is is looking inside from the windshield basically, and in the back you can see like what's supposed to be the background, like what's behind the car in the street, but you can tell it's like stock footage of people driving. Like you see the same cars now and then, like it's very much on a loop. It's pretty obvious, and I don't know if it was intentional for it to be obvious, but it was kind of annoying to me.
Yeah, just another drop in the bucket of checking the timestamp, so to speak.
Yeah, I get what you're laying down. I know what you mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good.
When they're saying hi to the neighbors or whatever, the Ben Stiller and his family are living like next door. Like his dad Jerry Stiller was there as well, and he's basically like, "Hi, we're the Stillers," and they're like, "Oh, we're still the Millers." So just gotta get that alliteration in there, I guess.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by that sequence whatsoever, to be honest.
Yeah, like it was very weird that they had him play himself.
Just for a joke, too.
Yeah. And he even like looks at Jennifer Aniston as like, "Hey, have we met before a couple of times?" And it's basically like a meta joke of how they've worked together in like Along Came Polly and in Friends, and it's like, I get that they've worked together, but this is really taking me out of the movie. And after so many other things I've had to like try to look past, but I can't because there's like a lot of ridiculous things dominating this sequel.
Yeah, the fact that they try to Ocean's 12 everything without proper setup, we might add, on top of everything else, it just kind of gets to you, It just kind of gets under your skin, like a bunch of spiders crawling under your skin.
It's been forever since I've seen Ocean's 12, so I don't know what you mean exactly.
You know how I don't remember it particularly well myself, but remember how towards the end they all like they have to they're about to be caught or something, and they have to each pretend that they are the actor that plays the character.
Oh, that... I don't remember that at all. That's weird, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll just have to take your word for it. If I'm ever in some sort of game show and the only way for me to win $1 million is to answer a question about that, I'll have to use what I remember from what you told me,
Yeah, guess it'll just be on my... Guess your failure will just be on my head then.
But, yeah, the whole growing the plants plotline kind of falls by the wayside when, like, the plants are wilting and David is not sure how to get them to be potent again after he's promised to sell them to some shady characters.
Yeah, learning nothing from the first movie, we might add.
Yeah, so like The Rock and his henchmen are like after the family now. So and they try breaking into the house and they try defending it like Home Alone style, basically.
Yeah, and just again, speaking of cars, kind of reminded me of which Fast and the Furious was it where The Rock was introduced as the one who was after our main people? I think it was 4. I can't remember.
Like it was either 4 or 5 or 6. They all kind of blend together to me.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. Actually, I think it was 4 or 5, definitely. 6 is the one where everything just started flying off the handle, and they kind of had to course correct it after that. God, I can't believe I've seen most of those movies. Note.
Yeah, but any course correction didn't last too long as they eventually went into space and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, so during this entire comedic sequence with The Rock attempting to infiltrate the heavily and yet crudely reinforced house, what did you think about the addition of the comedic cartoon sound effects, such as the slippery slipping on soap sound effect, or the bangs and crashes and such that you might hear in old cartoons?
It felt very out of place, and it also felt like they were intentionally trying to emulate the style of a Home Alone or even a Three Ninjas, maybe. Like stuff that feels like it's in the John Hughes style by inserting sound effects like that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like it was kind of... again, lots of things in this movie are so distracting that at this point, I don't know, like, if it got to a point where everything was so over the top that it made even more sense for there to be those sound effects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. At this point I was pretty checked out of being at all seriously invested in anything that was happening. I was just basically along for the ride, so I actually didn't think it was as egregious as it might have otherwise been.
Yeah, and like as The Rock is almost gonna beat the living daylights out of David, the taxi that contains Kevin James, Courtney Cox, and Carl Weathers drives back through the house, like basically breaking through the front and crashing into The Rock. So basically like killing him. Very ironic.
Yeah, it's like that scene. You probably haven't seen this movie, but in Tokyo Godfathers, this animated movie, there's a scene where just out of nowhere, the main characters are in like a convenience store or whatever, and just out of nowhere, a car just crashes into the store, and it's never explained or touched upon whatsoever. It felt kind of like that, but less absurd, making it actually more absurd given everything we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also felt kind of UFO, A Question of Priorities, when the car hits Striker's son.
But that was cinematographically built up to, you might say.
Right, yeah, and it was handled seriously there. It's a good episode for people who haven't seen it, but yeah, here it's just... like, it's kind of absurd how it happens here, but it was also set up, so it's not as absurd. So it's a really weird roundabout way of saying that they did it kind of well, but it still felt weird. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think you're getting at something crucial here, which is that if there's one thing this movie did well, and there really is pretty much just one thing it did well, it's that it's the almost Shaun of the Dead style setup and payoff attempts that they made and succeeded in. The Ritz Crackers thing, like we said before, this entire sequence, the fact that it takes place on the San Andreas Fault, which just goes off towards the part where we're getting to.
Yeah, like there's that whole earthquake sequence and really testing the fortitude of this family, and
Physical house that they're in as well.
Yeah.
The Rock is like still like before he's like completely dead and he's looking at the Millers, he's like, you gotta remember that nothing's more important than family, and then he dies.
Yeah. It was a little much. It was a little much, I have to say.
Yeah, so the Millers are just barely able to escape the house, and like after the house collapses, the neighbors are out in the street, and like even though there's very clearly an earthquake, one of the neighbors is like, whoa, was your house haunted like in those movies? Is that what happened? And with a straight face, David looks at the neighbor and just says, yes.
Yeah, leaving you to wonder whether they even believed it or not. Whether who believed what, in a way. Maybe they themselves believe after all that's happened that really this is just some sort of supernatural force at work, right? I mean,
yeah. It does feel very supernatural, without the 11 seasons or however long it lasted.
without all the constant filler and waiting.
Yeah. God, it makes me mad knowing how long that show lasted.
Yeah, I mean every prominent show of the like 2010s overstayed its welcome. Not that I even watch television, but even I who's just on the periphery of all this just knows like The Walking Dead lasted like what, 11 years or something.
Well, it lasted 12 seasons, and I'll admit the middle seasons like got too slow, and like it felt like they were trying hard not to catch up to the comics. But the last few seasons, I would say, redeemed the show. Although the ending is done better in the comics, even though I liked the ending somewhat in the show. So yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't know I was dealing with an expert here. To quote that other ancient meme.
No, yeah, I was actually remembering when Dylan said that like The Walking Dead still being on ruins his life on like one of your podcasts. I don't remember the exact context, but yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it's probably why it kind of stuck in my memory. I didn't even remember that particular instance, but yeah.
Right. Well, speaking of barely memorable instances, what'd you think of the way that this movie closed out?
Well, I was thrown completely for a loop, Steven, to be honest with you. The fact that they just all get arrested at this point and the rest of the movie takes place in jail, yeah, that was pretty impressive in a way.
Yeah, it was an Arrested Development, you might say. In fact, Will Arnett played one of the people in the cells, so there you go.
Yeah, and it just really drives home how everything in this movie was purposely and carefully constructed to just be a reference to something else, just a lame, pointless reference.
I mean, in a way that kind of makes it brilliant that it committed to that, you know?
Yeah, it really avenged it at the end. Or, yeah, avenged isn't necessarily a synonym for redeemed, but, just had to get that in there.
It's kind of ridiculous how after all that time, they got off scot-free at the end of the first movie, and then in the second movie, they just end up in jail because of, getting back into that world of trying to sell drugs and whatnot, and it's like...
And just hiring the wrong person, that was really the lesson I got out of it, is trust no one. Just don't trust anyone whatsoever.
Oh yeah, like in X-Files, trust no one. Do 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 do. That was Twilight Zone theme, which I did on purpose.
Oh, I wouldn't know. Even though I have watched a considerable amount of the Twilight Zone, for some reason.
I did like the blooper reel in the credits. Well, first off, like, what was your favorite variation of the "you guys are getting paid" meme in this movie?
Probably towards the end when they're what are they called? Jail uniforms? It's not scrubs. That's doctor uniforms. Shoot, jumpsuits. Is that what they are? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
But yeah, my favorite was probably towards the end where Kenny was like, he got the generic one, whereas the everyone else got the sort of like upgraded you were in the witness protection program version of the uniforms, and he goes, "You guys are getting played, but it's plaid, right?" He just pronounced it wrong.
Yeah.
Kind of cheap since they already did played before, but I thought it was funny just because of the punish nature of it.
Yeah. I kind of liked the one where, they had like, they were dealing with like some insect infestation in their house because of how messy it was. And then he's like, "You guys are getting Raid?" Like, the bug spray.
Right, yeah, another instance of product placement.
Yeah. All that is to say that that meme overstayed its welcome in this. And, since this is delayed replay, I might as well say you guys are getting delayed.
So... or replayed.
Yeah, replayed. You guys are getting replayed. Okay. But yeah, I like the blooper reel in the credits. I feel like not enough movies these days have blooper reels. What were a couple of your favorite bloopers?
Yeah, it felt very Pixar. In fact, I'd say my favorite was probably where it just cuts out halfway through, and then they just do slap in some Pixar blooper reels, almost as if they ran out of time and energy, and just struck a deal with Disney.
Yeah, like they inserted never before seen Pixar bloopers from like WALL-E, where WALL-E is like looking at Eve when she's deactivated and he's trying to act all sad, but then Eve can't stop laughing, so she keeps on laughing, and the director's like, "Cut, what did I say about keeping it together?" So that was weird.
Yeah, incredibly strange that they would just slap those in here, but hey, at this point I'm pretty much okay with anything.
Yeah, I kind of like the blooper where they're trying to think of some places to go, and like Jennifer Aniston's reading a list, and she's like, "Oh, we could go to the museum," but she keeps on mispronouncing museum and cracking up after each mispronunciation. Like she keeps saying museum or museum, and it's just so like it was probably frustrating for everyone on set, honestly.
Yeah.
So, how would you say this sequel compares to the whatever you remember of the first movie?
Well, considering I don't remember, considering I remember almost nothing from the first one, I'd say it was actually an improvement. Because, it's better than nothing, right? That's what my memory of the first one is. Just flat out nothing, so.
A home improvement, you might say.
Right, yeah, Home Alone improvement.
Yeah, well, as someone who remembers the first movie well enough, I think it was a step down, honestly. So I guess we could go into final thoughts and score out of 10. And so what are your final thoughts, score out of 10, and, of measurement for that score for We're Still the Millers?
Oh, yeah, well, I thought this was all leading up to the San Andreas Fault going off and just ending everything in a huge cavalcade of destruction and misery. Turns out that was only the middle of the movie. And that kind of disappointed me. That is an instance of my expectations getting the better of me. So I shouldn't hold the movie accountable for betraying me as it so cruelly did. But I'm going to anyway and give it a 0 fake last names out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, when you go into a movie, you should have no expectations whatsoever. And if you didn't like the movie, it's all your fault.
Yeah.
Your San Andreas fault, you might say.
Right.
Yeah, I thought this one was a dud. It went too over the top. There were funny moments here and there, but they weren't enough to get above the glass half empty feel that I got after watching this. So I give this 5 out of 10 uh, taxi fights. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a fairly judicious score, actually. So I guess you're just kinder than I am.
I mean, I was kind of having this argument with my friend Greg recently. How like I think 5 out of 10 is mediocre, and he's like, no, 5 out of 10 is average, and it's like we just have different perspectives on like what the numbers mean.
Yeah, I mean, school, like the American school system beats into your head that 5 out of 10 is bad because it's an F, right? You know.
Yeah, I mean, Greg is from England, so that's the other thing. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
there's also like like I guess we have like a different perspective on like what okay means. Like he was saying that mediocre and okay are basically the same, but to me, whenever I hear the word mediocre, I think of when SpongeBob, whose body was controlled by plankton at the time, called Squidward a mediocre clarinet player, and that sounds more negative than okay, you know?
Yeah, that's sort of a rip your heart out moment, to be honest. So yeah,
Yeah.
going by that, mediocre does actually mean just like bottom of the barrel tier.
Yeah, that was a top 5 anime betrayals moment.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Mediocre to me does have the connotation of like below average, not average.
All right, so I guess I'll do it. Thanks for being on the show again, Kiyan. I don't know that you necessarily have anything to plug anymore, but yeah.
I don't really. I do, but they're just completely unrelated to this, so I'm not going to show myself. But what I will take this moment to say is this went by really fast. I mean, I feel like we just started. I don't know if it's the same for you or if it's the fact that I really haven't done this in half a year. But yeah, I had a great time being on, and it flew by. So thanks for having me, Steven.
No, yeah, it was fun, and I totally forgot how warm it was here. I don't know if that's just because it's getting darker and cooler, but yeah, it went by pretty quickly and was a lot of fun. So thanks for taking up the invite.
Yeah.
All right, and I'll include my own plugs in the edit as I've been doing these days. All right, so at Steven Shinder on Instagram, the website formerly known as Twitter, Threads, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook, stevenshinder.com. Actually, on the Facebook page, I made a post with the proof copies of the hardcovers of my previous book and my new book. So check those out. That'll be out soon, finally. Is this recording? Let me check. Okay, yeah, it is. Sorry about that. You can also find me on Yesshift, a podcast/vlog I do with my dad. There's actually a solo one done by me on Friday the 4th. It's a news episode. Just due to scheduling, I had to be the one to go live on my own, but my dad will be back for the interviews that are coming up. So yeah, follow Yesshift and see what we have coming up and what we've already done. And you can email Delayed Replay via delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on GTA San Andreas. Here we go again. Yeah, I censored myself, so it's less editing work. And you can also find me on Letterboxd and Goodreads. Check the show notes for that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. It still does not look like the triple play finale I was on last year is on decorativevegetable.com yet, but I guess keep an eye out for that and check out their backlog. You know, Dylan and Kiyan record a lot of great stuff on there. There's the UFO question priorities episode of Inevitable I alluded to, and lots of other stuff like Trust Your Doctor, Doctor Who podcast, Zenith of Blake 7 podcast, and inevitable sci-fi triple plays movie trilogies, all sorts of good stuff. And after the sign off that I'll get back to in a moment, there won't be a movie review from other Steven, as there hasn't been a trip to the theater since the last one. But what'll probably happen is that there'll be something else at the end of this episode in place of that. But what'll probably happen is for the Star Trek Forward episode, you will hear some thoughts on Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 at the very end of that. And then these will be like a few weeks or maybe even a month after they're out. But for the episodes coming out after that Star Trek one, there will be a Despicable Me 4 episode and a Deadpool 3 episode. And it feels like it kind of makes sense to save a couple reviews for those, like putting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem review at the end of the Despicable Me one since it's animation, and Blue Beetle at the end of Deadpool 3 since it's very much more superhero, I guess you could say. So those theater trips will come up, and those reviews will be tacked onto the ends of those episodes, and people will have had plenty of time to see those movies. But for this episode that you're listening to right now, instead of another movie review at the end, there will be, I guess you could call it a blooper reel, outtakes, basically me and Kiyan testing out our recording method on the Podcasters app before the show. What's weird is when I was looking for the first file, there are these two files which I've put back to back at the end. The first one was 3 minutes and 19 seconds, and when I was looking for it in my folder system, my file system, whatever, I found a recording from 3 years ago. And like both of these files have like weird, like just random numbers or letters or whatever, because that's how it looked when it was downloaded. But there was a test that I did with my dad before starting Delayed Replay to try out the app as I was using it at the time. And that was also 3 minutes and 19 seconds. So that's kind of spooky right there. But anyway, that's what you'll hear after this sign off, which we'll get back to right now without further delay. Next episode will be on the fourth Star Trek reboot movie. It's called Star Trek Forward. But without further delay, have a good day.
All right, I'm in.
All right, yeah, you packed into the mainframe.
Yeah. It took a bit, but I'm completely inept, so it's to be expected.
But we have that in common from time to time.
Yeah. Also, no, I don't catch your drift whatsoever.
Yeah, that was on purpose. It was nonsense. No, I was basically helping my friend with her dog and whatnot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, so I'm sitting here in my car right outside my place, but I'm on mobile data, so hopefully it doesn't hopefully this doesn't just drain my battery. That wouldn't be great.
What percent are you at?
Like 100, because I charged my phone right before this, but hopefully it doesn't just tank it.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't Pokemon Go your phone.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Just 90 to 30 with one toss of a Pokeball.
All right. So, what you were gonna say something, or?
No. I'm good. I was gonna keep going, but I was just gonna be garbage. So just gonna keep on shooting the. But we can just launch into it.
Okay.
I was gonna say though, I've recorded in this car before, not podcasts, but I do like personal vlogs that I don't share them, but I just do them for myself. Oh, nice. There's a dog. The third host. But
Yeah. Let me close the window.
yeah. I've made recordings in this car before, just for like personal use, and they didn't sound too bad. So hopefully that will be the case here.
Yeah. I mean, you sound pretty clear to me. So.
Okay.
Also, I just noticed the last name you gave yourself on this Kiyan Miller.
It's only 2 letters off. It's a little deceptive. It actually looks like my real name.
Yeah, well, like I kind of want to put this in the episode as like the outtakes at the end or whatever.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, so I first I want to see if like the audio of this processes if I click on finish recording to see if the test works. So,
Oh, sure. Yeah, so we just end this one and start a new one after that's done? Is that how it's going to work?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I'll end it and then I'll let it process. We'll see if it processes, and I'll text you like what happens, and then hopefully we should be able to like hop on, no problem again.
Sure.
All right. See you in a bit.
All right, we're back.
Yeah, after those sponsored messages.
Yeah. How did it sound?
Yeah, it sounded very.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, to throw a wrench in that, I changed my setup a little bit. One. Wait, you're kind of cutting in and out. And I think I know why. So what I did, right? So what I did is I just a little bit so that I can like my Wi-Fi. Just brought my car a little bit closer to the front door, which worked. But apparently, it worked. But apparently, didn't have good enough a connection to have you sound like anything but a garbled mess. So I just turned Wi-Fi back off. Hopefully, it doesn't just tank my battery.
Okay.
I also moved into the passenger seat of my car, so I don't know if that's going to affect anything. Hopefully